Alright, I'm sorry if this is bad, but this is my cipher research presentation, and I was given Windtalkers. Well, I chose Windtalkers, I guess. So the Windtalkers were a group of Navajos who were recruited to send messages through the radio using their own language. As time went on, their own language was encrypted as well to help with more military vocabulary. So they were used during World War II as well as during the Korean War, and they were able to inform the U.S. People on the other side during the Pacific, across the Pacific, where troops and planes were, and also tell them where they were at the time, be able to tell them specific places. Many code talkers were actually were not only asked, but they were also forced to be trained to speak English, and they were trained to use the machines in order to communicate with the Americans. Many of the natives were punished for actually speaking their own language during their training, and being able for them to be able to speak their own language was really nice for them because they were able to be who they were without punishment. The first code talkers were recruited in 1940 by the U.S. Army branch. The rest of the branches followed a few years after. They were trained to learn new military codes that were unwritten, and they were placed in a guarded room until they had figured it out. There were two types of codes that they used to send messages through the radios. Type 1 only contained 26 Navajo words, which translates to every single letter in the alphabet. So if they wanted to use A, they would say Wolachi, which means ant in Navajo. Type 2 was actual words translated from Navajo to English. There were 211 terms used, but it was later updated to 411. Many of the words that the military vocabulary were actually, there were no words for it in Navajo. So many of the words they made up or were close to what the actual words they were going for. So submarine would have been called ironfish or beshlo. This wasn't exactly the safest job. The Japanese would target officers and many others who were over the Pacific. It was hard for the code talkers, especially because they had to keep moving while they were transmitting and receiving these messages. They also had to work in pairs, one for sending the messages and then the other for translating. So many of the officers, when they were done with World War II, were told that they could not say anything about their work, and they couldn't tell their family members what they were doing in the army. So during that time, many of the codes that they had encrypted hadn't been broken. So they weren't really allowed to talk much about it because if they still needed them, they wanted those translations to be secret. And even though it was declassified in 1968, the recognition of the code talkers was still very slow. Some happened in 1970 while others happened in 1980, but it wasn't until 2001 that they were formally recognized for their service during the war as well as after the wars. The Congressional Gold Medals were not only rewarded to code talkers, but the Navajo as well. So see, these are some of the code words. These are your military words: ship, battleship, aircraft, submarine, minesweeper, destroyer, transport. Now many of these words were not put into the Navajo vocabulary, so they did Tondai for ships, which pretty much means sea force, Losao, which means whale. I'm not going to try to pronounce that because I will slaughter it, but bird carrier for aircraft. Submarine was beshlo, as I mentioned earlier, ironfish. Minesweeper is cha, or beaver. Destroyer was chalo, or shark. And then transport, I'm not going to say that again because I will also slaughter it, or man carrier. And that is everything.